The majority can often be wrong. The majority followed Aaron in rebellion in Exodus chapter 32. The majority voted not to go into the promised land in Numbers chapter 32. The majority followed false gods many times throughout the Old Testament. Read through it and you'll see the majority was wrong. The majority of religious leaders hated Jesus. The majority of the world hates Christians. So it is not true that all scientists believe in evolution. If it were, that wouldn't matter, okay? And you don't determine truth that way. But let me share with you a few Christians who are scientists, who are strong believers in creation, and who are also very brilliant scientists. Robert Gentry, a friend of mine from Tennessee, is a brilliant scientist when it comes to radioactive material and the disposal of radioactive waste. He worked at Oak Ridge Laboratories. He published this book here, Creation's Tiny Mysteries. Excellent book about radiopolonium halos. You can get it through our ministry, in our bookstore or on our website. Robert Gentry was doing tremendous work. It was published in many major science journals about radiopolonium halos being found in granites all over the world. I went and met with Robert Gentry, saw the polonium halos through the microscope in his laboratory, and everybody was fine until they realized, wow, his research proves the Big Bang Theory is not true. And boy, they shut off his funding and his grant money in a hurry. He finally said, well, we don't have a job for you anymore, just because his research was supporting creation. Talk to Robert Gentry up in Halo. Go to www.halos.com and see for yourself. Roger DeHart was a science teacher near Seattle, Washington. He was told he could not inform his students of errors in the textbooks. Here they've got textbooks with mistakes in them, but he couldn't tell the students about the mistakes because those mistakes were used to support the evolution theory. They said you can't even pass out current science journals to inform students of mistakes in the textbooks. That's not science. That's that burn the heretic attitude that some people get, or go burn the witch. And there's talk about a witch hunt. The evolutionists are on a witch hunt against the creationists in the public schools. They will try desperately to get them fired from their job. Kevin Haley was a biology teacher at Central Oregon Community College in Bend, Oregon. He lost his job simply because he was exposing errors in the textbooks. He'd say, kids, the information on page 87 has been proven wrong. Disregard that. That won't be on the test. And he's right. It was proven wrong. I debated one professor one time, and I gave out like 20 or 30 lies in the textbooks, and he got up and said, now, folks, Hovind's right. All these things are not true. But, he said, Hovind, I got a question. What are you going to replace all this with? In other words, we can't take the lies out of the books until I find a replacement. In other words, I've got to provide evidence for his theory, or else we can't take the lies out of the books. Talk about dumb. That's not the way science works, okay? You teach the kids the truth. Just teach the truth, okay? And if all you have are lies to back up your theory, then get a new theory. In Texas, Baylor University fired William Dembski just because he advocated that there might be an intelligent designer. Oh, that's heresy. There could be a designer. You're out of here. You're fired. Forrest Mims was a science writer for 20 years. He published in National Geographic, Science Digest, American Journal of Physics, over 60 magazines and newspapers. He was denied a job as science writer for Scientific American simply because he was a creationist. They didn't want to have a creationist on their staff. Teacher Rod LeVake was told he could not share information that might help students doubt Darwin's theory. See, Darwin's theory is sacred. You don't question it without losing your job in many school systems. Okay? The same thing happened in Russia 10, 15 years ago. If a teacher got up in their class and said, kids, I don't believe communism works, he'd be out of a job, and maybe out of the country, or out of this life. They'd kill him or send him off to Siberia. You get the same kind of academic Siberia, people sent off to academic Siberia if they don't support the evolution theory right here in America, the land of the free and the home of the slave. Mr. Eller told his teacher Dan Clark in Lafayette, Indiana, Mr. Eller was the superintendent, that he could not introduce creationism to his class. So Dan Clark resigned. He quit. Many good teachers are dropping out of the public school system because they're not allowed to teach kids the truth. The problem is not the law. The law says you can teach creation. Not a problem to teach creation legally. The courts have ruled it's okay to teach creation, but the boss says don't do it. The ACLU, which is the American Communist Lawyers Union, they learned years ago all they have to do is threaten to sue and the school will back down. Even though the ACLU knows they will lose the suit, doesn't matter, the threat of a suit is enough to make it the teachers get fired. Just the threat of a suit. And so that's what's happening. We're losing by default and not even putting up a good fight. Dean Kenyon was a professor at San Francisco State University in San Francisco. He wrote many books about evolution. He was the poster boy for the evolutionist. He was a strong believer in the theory. And one day he got converted and began to believe in creation. And they fired him. He sued. They put him back in as a lab assistant, you know, washing test tubes, which the students do normally. And here's a guy, 20-year, I believe, tenured professor. Finally, after a long battle, he was reinstated with his job. But if he hadn't been tenured, he wouldn't have kept his job. That's what happened to Dean Kenyon. He wrote the book Of Pandas and People, which you can get through our ministry. Dr. Denny at Texas Tech University had on his website for years that if you wanted to get recommended for medical school, he's from Lubbock, Texas, that you had to confess to believing in evolution. If you don't believe in evolution, he's not going to recommend you for medical school. When I spoke in Lubbock, Texas in the fall of 2002, the students there got together and offered Denny $900 if he would debate me. He refused. He wouldn't debate for 2 hours for $900. I don't know how much he makes an hour, but I suspect it's not quite that much. So, Mr. Denny, I'll come anytime, anywhere, and take you on intellectually in a debate on creation evolution. Evolution is one of the dumbest ideas in the history of humanity, and the devil is laughing at you for believing in that silly theory. And if you don't trust Christ, you're going to go to hell. I'm not your enemy, I'm your friend. I don't want to see you go to hell. I'd like to see you get converted. But what you're doing is unfair and certainly unwise, and I think un-American. To require a student to believe a certain religion, and all you have is a religious worldview of evolution, and you require students to believe that before you give them a recommendation letter. Come on, grow up, let kids learn the truth. We can go on and on how people are discriminated against because of their belief in creation. Patrick Henry College was notified they were going to deny their recommendation to be accredited simply because they didn't believe in evolution. We'll have lots of information on our website about how students or universities or teachers are discriminated against because of their belief in creation. Now, it wasn't always this way. If you go back in the past, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, all the scientists believed in creation. Here's a list of quite a few scientists: Francis Bacon, Johann Kepler, Blaise Pascal, Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton. These guys were the founders of major branches of science, Carolus Linnaeus, and they were creationists. George Cuvier, on and on the list goes of hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of very famous scientists who were creationists. Not always young earth creationists, but certainly creationists, and many were young earth creationists. Richard Owen, Louis Agassiz, James Joule. All you got to do is notice, folks, nearly all branches of science are started by people who believed in creation, not people who believed in evolution. The evolutionists don't come up with anything. They don't create anything. They come in and take over an institution that's already going, and many Christian colleges have been taken over by evolutionists. Harvard, Princeton, Yale started off as Christian schools, and now they've been taken over by those who believe in evolution. The evolutionists don't go start something. They just take over like a leech, you know, or a tick, or a parasite, what somebody else has already created. Wernher von Braun, space scientist, was a strong believer in creation. There are many books out. There's a good book, In 6 Days, Why 50 Scientists Chose to Believe in Creation. There are quite a few books on this topic. You can see our website, drdino.com, and get more. Okay, next question. What about separation of church and state? Is it okay to discuss creation in public schools? Well, first place, the phrase separation of church and state is not found in the Constitution. Don't let somebody tell you that the law says it has to be a separation of church and state. That's baloney. That phrase was used by Thomas Jefferson in a letter that he wrote to some pastors in the Danbury Association, a Baptist association in Connecticut. He's the one that said, the First Amendment has erected a wall of separation between church and state. Thomas Jefferson said that. It's not in the Constitution. And by the way, if there's a wall between the two, it's a one-dimensional wall. It keeps the government out of the church. It was not designed to keep the church out of the government. So there's no such thing as separation of church and state found in the Constitution. The fact of the matter is the Founding Fathers, when they gave the First Amendment, Article 1, the same day, I believe, voted to give, I think, $7 or $10 or $15,000 something to a mission in St. Louis to help a Catholic mission reach the Indians there with what they thought was the gospel. So you just go through the history. Go to wallbuilders.com, David Barton's excellent website, and get some of his material, and you can see how that the Founding Fathers were certainly strong believers in creation and had no intention of the government getting involved in the church, but they had every intention of the church getting involved in the government. And the idea of no Christianity in public schools would have been anathema to the Founding Fathers. They would have sent those guys off on a ship to some other country. Okay, next question.